There's a teeny tiny aleph in the first word of the book of Leviticus, or in Hebrew, Vayikra, which is where we are right now in the Torah, reading the Torah for this Shabbat. This little aleph is very small, written very small, but his importance is quite outsized. This aleph is the last letter in the word Vayikra, a word which means, and God called. The whole book begins, Vayikra el Moshe, and God called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting. So why the tiny aleph in the word Vayikra, and God called? There's a midrash that says that as Moses thought about how the people might react to God calling to him, he became full of humility. He didn't want the people to think that he thought he was so special or worthy of their attention. He didn't want to come off as taking up a lot of space or self-important. So he asked God if instead of writing the word Vayikra, and God called to Moses, he could drop the aleph completely and instead just write the word Vayikar, which would mean, and God accidentally happened upon some guy named Moses who happened to be standing at the right place at the right time. Now, God had a deep love for Moses. And so we can imagine God rolling God's eyes just a little bit and agreeing, fine, Moses, we'll split the difference. Just make the aleph little. Moses found it hard to accept this experience in his life as anything more than a Vayikar moment. It just happened to him. It's fine. But God knows that the aleph belongs there. God knows that this is not just a passing happenstance, that this is a big deal, that this was a Vayikra moment, and that Moses is worthy of the people paying attention to him. Tonight we have gathered to mark a Shabbat on which we engage in a conversation about pregnancy loss, to honor those who have gone through it, to learn how to talk about it, and to think about it through the lens of Jewish tradition and Jewish community. Because quite often, we as a community, with no ill intention and no desire to cause pain, we treat a person who experiences this kind of loss as if it were just a Vayikar experience. It happened. It happens. And then life moves on. But for many, many people, this loss of a life that didn't get a chance to become a life, the loss of a potential life, it's a Vayikra experience. It's big and it's weighty and it's very real. And the person going through it is often in great need of being called out to, called in towards. Because of so many societal norms and a general discomfort with vulnerability, a person who has experienced pregnancy loss, much like our tiny aleph, might shrink away just at the time when they need their community to see them the most. So what does this have to do with Jewish community anyway? Jewish community, sacred community, is about knowing the contours of each other's lives, celebrating and grieving with one another. Just a short while ago tonight, we shared our simchas, big and small. And all week long, this week, we've had members sitting Shiva, their homes full of CBE members. Why? Because to be in Jewish community is to journey together, to hold each other up when we are weeping, and to lift each other up on chairs to dance when we can. But very often, pregnancy loss goes completely unknown, sometimes happening before anyone else even knew that we had something to lose. And so many members of our community who we see every day, who we sit next to at Shabbat, and who we are on teams with, are going through a devastating loss right in front of our eyes, and we don't even know. And that, which is nobody's fault, is a breakdown of sacred community. To treat what is a Vayikra moment as merely a Vayikar moment. So tonight is a tikkun. It's a repair of a crack in our community, a crack which exists in most communities. It's a casting of light into the overlooked corners where so many souls dwell from time to time. It is the restoring of a shrinking aleph to a full-sized aleph. I want to share with you 3 avenues that we'll experience tonight as we weave our way towards this repair. The first is in the telling of stories. It's hard to care for one another in the theoretical. To know a person's story is to be able to see them clearly, to understand them, to care for them. Tonight, members of CBE's Pregnancy Loss Small Group will grow our aleph by courageously sharing their experiences into this space to help us practice becoming a community that is more and more comfortable with sharing and receiving each other's stories about pregnancy loss as we become more visible to each other. The second avenue is through community support. CBE strives to be a place where people can feel less alone. We do that through the extraordinary community of our small group, through making sure that you know that your whole clergy team, every one of us, is here to support you and walk with you. We do that through our chesed team, offering care for a person who has faced pregnancy loss the same way they offer care for all kinds of loss. And finally, the third avenue is through the creation of new ritual and drawing on of old ritual. Rituals build scaffolding around a person's grief to hold us, even when that grief is for someone that no one else has ever met. In fact, our ancestors crafted many rituals around these parts of life, because before there was modern medicine, pregnancy loss was even more common and was probably easier to talk about. So the leaders of the Pregnancy Loss Small Group, Lisbeth Kaiser and Nicole Nemetz, are crafting a morning ritual, getting training in leading communal prayer reflective of the traditional practices of Shiva. And they discovered a Talmudic tradition that speaks of an even tekuma, a stone of assurance. It's a red stone or a pink stone or a different kind of stone that women in community would share among one another as they experienced pregnancy loss or infertility, or often both. This stone was not meant to be magic. It was meant as comfort, that a person holding this stone would know that she or they were not alone, that many had held it before her, that her story was not invisible or just some small thing that happened and now is over, but that she was living through something real, and that others were walking with her, praying with her, grieving, and even healing with her. They now have such a stone for anyone experiencing pregnancy loss who might find comfort in holding it, keeping it with you over time as you walk this same path through the stages of grief or hope or both. Telling our stories, being in deliberate community, and creating rituals where they don't currently exist makes us visible to each other so that we don't confuse a vayikar moment with a vayikra moment, that we might even learn to call out towards one another, and so that we can care for one another as sacred community does. It is now my very great honor to invite forward our members, Lisa Tauber, followed by Amy McDonald, to share their story with us.
Bear with me. Okay. When I was pregnant with my now healthy, almost 10-month-old, Lev, I kept waiting for the doctors to tell me something was wrong. I was handed sonogram pictures a more naive or optimistic person might want to show loved ones, but that I tucked away, hoping I'd be glad I kept them. Even with no indication for it, I opted for an amnio, despite the risk of miscarriage, so that I could finally be assured that nothing was wrong. Sitting in the high-risk wing at NYU, I was terrified. As terrified as I'd been the year before, undergoing a procedure to remove the baby that didn't have a heartbeat. My loss, which came between Lev and my 4-year-old Ezra, was my only loss, but felt like a rite of passage. I had always known my own mother had 9 pregnancies for 4 babies. I am that 4th baby, so I am proof that I was really wanted, and that loss is a part of having babies. I always feared loss would be part of my story, and spent most of my first pregnancy anxious but hopeful. When we went in for our first scan with my pregnancy after Ezra, the doctor seemed unsure about the timing, and I knew something was wrong, but all we could do was wait. Waiting and seeing what so many women come to know, to resent. There is no hierarchy of loss. It's all bad. And yet, I feel like one of the lucky ones for 2 reasons. First, my loss was early enough in my pregnancy, around 11 weeks, that I hadn't been celebrating it for long, nor had I told Ezra he was having a sibling. Second, the pregnancy loss small group had its inaugural meeting a few months after my loss, and the timing felt like kismet. Other women in our group have spoken about the loneliness of loss. There is stigma, there is fear of pity, and there is shame. I am so lucky to have found solidarity, a shared vocabulary and a surprising universality of experience and emotion, of unwarranted guilt, unexpected triggers, and of knowing the difference between the hope before and the soldiering on after. I mourned my loss, I shared my fertility journey, and I acknowledged my lack of joy when I finally did get pregnant again. They understood how loss sours pregnancy. The first pregnancy loss Shabbat found me when I really needed it, still in the deeper stages of mourning. It was the catharsis I didn't know I needed, to have our community bear witness and support those of us on this journey, to bring literal light to a subject often talked about in whispers and only amongst those of us who have experienced it. Since that time, my grief and my place in the pregnancy loss group have evolved. I showed up as a listener, and I refer to the group in casual conversation to normalize loss and talking about fertility. I am grateful to all of you who have showed up tonight, and to those of you who have experienced loss and haven't found the words or the space to talk about it. We see you, we support you, and we are here.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for listening to this. I have experienced 6 pregnancy losses, including first trimester miscarriages, a second trimester abortion because of a chromosomal abnormality, and a termination of pregnancy at 21 weeks. Tonight, I'm going to speak about this late-term loss, which was my first pregnancy and resulted in the deaths of our identical twin sons, our first children. I do want to say that everything in this pregnancy had been going great. The amnio and all the diagnostics and checkups showed that our babies were healthy, growing, and developing. They were moving a lot, and this made me out of my mind with happiness. At the 21-week anatomy scan, we received the sudden and devastating news that our sons were both in critical condition, related to a placental problem called twin transfusion syndrome. The specialist doctors told us that our babies had a 0 chance of survival, that my fertility was at considerable risk, and that our only option was to terminate the pregnancy immediately. And this is the part that I want to talk about, how brutal it was to terminate this pregnancy, to be the person that allowed our children to be killed. Even though I had barely just become a parent, I definitely knew that as a mother, my most important job was to keep my children alive. And still, I signed the forms and the medical consents to terminate. I went through 3 days of procedures and then the operation, which killed the babies and saved my uterus. The doctors didn't give us the option to see or hold our sons. They didn't give us birth certificates or death certificates, or ask us if we wanted to bury our children or have a funeral. And yet, I know our sons lived, and I know how much we loved them. I know that they died. Terminating this pregnancy was horrific for me, both physically and emotionally, but it also left me with a very serious moral injury, a deep and profound and agonizing grief. The situation was impossible, really. I wished so much that the twins would die before the operation that would kill them. And at the same time, I was completely shattered by having the wish for them to die, to save them from being killed, and to save myself from having them killed inside of my body. Mostly, I never talked about this with anyone, and that harmed me even more. You know, people say that time heals all wounds, and that is definitely not true for me. Time didn't heal my emotional and moral wounds. But thankfully, I eventually did find people, including some truly wonderful psychologists, who could be with me and bear with me the awful reality of what had happened. And slowly, I have been able to find a place inside of me for the sadness and the terribleness of these deaths, and for the everlasting love I have for these beautiful babies, our miraculous twins, our firstborns. And I just want to close by sharing with you a psalm that we spent a lot of time trying to communicate to our children at the end of their lives. It's Psalm 133, a song of ascents. How good and how pleasant it is that brothers dwell together. It is like fine oil on the head, running down onto the beard of Aaron that comes down over the collar of his robe, like the dew of Hermon that falls upon the mountains of Zion. There the Lord ordained blessing, everlasting life. Thank you so much.
It's really only because we have courageous leaders that there can be light on these stories. Just want to thank you for your courage and your heart and letting us see behind the masks that we wear. And just remind us how many people lit a candle before we came in here, how many stories we don't know, who need leaders like you to begin to tell them. Thank you. I'm honored now to call forward two of the leaders who have allowed this to become here at CBE, something that we do here, that we learn, that we make mistakes about, and then we figure out more about, is through Lisbeth and Nicole. And I'll invite you forward to speak and share with us just the wisdom that you have taught me and so many along this journey.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much, Rabbi Steph. Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you all so much for being here. Wow, I need to okay. Wow. When I learned that my second pregnancy was ending, we had just moved with our toddler to a larger home in a new neighborhood, anticipating our growing family. I had yet to get my bearings when I felt the ground slip out from under me. Within the next 10 months, I would suffer 2 more miscarriages, each as traumatizing and disorienting as the first. There were times I almost lost my grip on my own life, times which haunt me to this day. I remember wishing I could tell people that an uncle had died or that I had knee surgery. They would send flowers, food, offers of childcare. A miscarriage is both of these things, a medical event and a loss, plus an insane third thing, which is that it all goes down inside your body. And yet, if I told people I had a miscarriage, I risked them backing away. In a culture that sends soup at the first sign of a sniffle, how can it be that some of the hardest moments of our lives are met with silence and solitude? CBE, we can do better. In fact, I think we can lead the charge. Nicole and I started the pregnancy loss small group as the first step in a culture shift around normalizing and supporting pregnancy loss. That means chesed, that means ritual. First and foremost, that means talking about it.
Thank you again so much to Lisa and Amy for doing just that tonight. Thank you for courageously sharing your stories with all of us. As Elizabeth and I have led our pregnancy loss group, we've continually encountered two significant issues: receiving care and giving care. So often, people hesitate to reach out for support because they feel their loss doesn't fit somehow. They might feel their experience with IVF loss, or a loss from decades ago, or even having children or currently being pregnant means they shouldn't seek support. On the flip side, people who want to help may hold back because they're afraid they'll say the wrong thing or simply don't know what to do. Two obstacles underlying all this are silence and stigma. We don't talk about pregnancy loss enough, and that silence leaves people suffering alone. I personally experienced this after my own medical termination. I felt deep shame and anxiety about how others would react, so I only confided in my two closest friends. Yet, when I finally did begin opening up to more people, not only did I feel immense relief, but I discovered just how many others had walked a similar path. I felt less alone, more understood, and ultimately more myself. Our losses, no matter the circumstances, are an essential part of our stories. One core mission of our group is to tear down these walls of silence and normalize conversations around pregnancy loss. We want everyone to know their grief is valid, regardless of when or how their loss occurred. Our group members include people who experienced loss recently and those whose loss was decades ago. All are welcome and all belong. And to those who want to help but aren't sure how, simply show up, be present, and listen without judgment. Check in regularly, let them know you're thinking of them, and say, "I'm sorry you're going through this." Offer specific help, like bringing food, assisting with errands, or helping with childcare, rather than vague gestures like, "Let me know if I can help." Oftentimes, people are just so worried about saying the wrong thing, so they say nothing at all, which further exacerbates this feeling of grieving in silence. Your presence and compassion can make all the difference.
A psychologist once defined trauma as not what happens to us, but what we hold inside us in the absence of empathy. Pregnancy loss is a part of life, but it only becomes traumatic when we look away, when we shy away, when we do nothing and say nothing. We can break this pattern. By being here tonight and receiving our stories, you are already making a difference. And by saving this small guide that we've made for you to take home tonight, you'll be ready to further the change outside of these walls. We're so grateful to Rabbi Steph and the CBE clergy for honoring us and encouraging us to form the pregnancy loss small group. We now have a space, a shared vocabulary, a community, and a tangible response for something many of us need. But we are not done, because it's what comes after we heal that we are only beginning to see. When our grief bears fruit, it looks like love and strength and wisdom. It looks like women who have found their footing and their people. Each and every one of us deserves this chance to be held in community and to be healed. And many of us need it. 1 in 4 women experience pregnancy loss. Our partners go through it too. It is highly probable that someone close to you has experienced pregnancy loss or will. You are now ready. Call them, send food or flowers, offer child care. You can tell them we sent you and that they are not alone.
Yasher koach. I know sometimes it's hard to know what to say after receiving such stories like this. There's a practice, though, that can help us in moments like this. We can respond by saying shamati, which means I heard you. I heard you. I received that. So the word is shamati, like the word shema, shamati. And you can look at any of the people who just spoke, and you can offer them shamati, thank you, and shamati. First of all, thank you, Amy and Lisa, for your courage tonight and for just giving us just one way in to know if it's not something that you know about here, if it's something you know about well, but you've never heard somebody else talk about it. It's a gift. It's this very, very enormous gift that you've given tonight. Thank you for that. And again, to Elizabeth and Nicole, my goodness. Your work has had ripple effects that have healed already and that have so much healing in front of them. And we are so grateful. A clergy is just a clergy team. It's the leaders of the congregation that make community real. So thank you for that. The melting down of walls, this agreement that we won't be invisible to each other, this decision to care what's behind each other's masks, this is how we heal the rift. This is how we do the tikkun for the crack in our community. This is where we begin. We have begun. Thank you. We're going to end this section with a poem, a prayer that was written by Elizabeth Kaiser. And it is our prayer for this community. And it comes through these beautiful, beautiful words that Elizabeth has written. But I want you to know it comes through also the heart of your entire clergy team. This is what we pray. On behalf of those whose loss is nameless, ambiguous, and unrecognized, yet who must pay in blood and in pain and in silence, I pray.
I pray for those whose need for care is great and collectively denied, who are upended from the inside or suspended by uncertainty, who handle life's hardest decisions without hands holding them up.
I pray for those who had only hoped for boring and received the opposite, whose simple wishes are repaid in grief, whose bodies transform into Edens, into hospices, into tombs.
I pray for all whose grief is unwitnessed and sentenced to calcify like a stone, who spend years learning how to carry that stone inside them without falling down, who split themselves in two rather than let go of their love for their children.
I pray for the anxious who fear falling to pieces, knowing how easily we break, for whom bitterness tastes safer than sweetness, who must carry a shield whenever they go out.
I pray for those drawn like chariots over the threshold of life and death, who know it's not earth side or heaven side, but inside, where angels come and go, who have cradled tiny arcs as their light was leaving, their stories unraveling.
I pray for those who have touched exaltment without acknowledgement, that we will open our doors and our arms to them and reflect them in their agony and their glory.
I pray at last for those who carry the memory of their losses alone. I pray to hold their losses in my heart next to mine, to share the burden of remembrance, of recognition, of love and awe.
We say it together.